Hi, I'm Chaplain Charlie Wharton with the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office.
And I'm Larry Crabtree, chaplain with the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office and the Maryland State Police. Well, Charlie, we have been just getting underway over the last week in looking at some relevant, helpful guidance in how to have meaningful, strong, healthy, intimate relationships with our significant other. Now, we're looking a lot at marriage as it relates to law enforcement officers, but again, this is good for anybody that's contemplating marriage or anyone that's in any kind of serious relationship. These are really all key fundamental principles on how to enjoy a healthy relationship with another person. And last time we talked about marital expectations, and I think that kind of set a good base. But today, we want to talk about one of the nitty-gritty, really important items in relationships, and that has to do with communication, and communication that leads to emotional intimacy and connection.
Let's start off with the negative first. Let's talk about some of the challenges. But I want to take a look at three things in particular within a law enforcement family. And the first one is the emotional nature, the emotional makeup of a law enforcement relationship. Law enforcement relationships tend to be more emotional than many others just by the nature of the work that we do. And sometimes those emotional makeups are at two very different perspectives. If I come in after working a shift and I've got all of this emotional baggage and all this excitement or this disappointment or whatever else, and I come into the family, a lot of times they're not going to share that same emotional status that I have coming off of the job. So I think we're often at two different places, and that can impact communication.
You know, Charlie, with that, have you ever heard it said, I think studies have been done, that the first 90 seconds when you re-engage your family will set the tone for the next 5 or 6 hours that are ahead of you?
I like that because my family was always good about when I came home, they could tell what kind of day I had. And they would either invite me up into to be with the family or just kind of say, okay, you go downstairs and we'll see you when you get ready to talk about this. So a very, very important observation. I think a second thing that is a challenge to law enforcement families when it comes to communication is time. There's problems with shift work. I remember when I first started out in law enforcement, I was a volunteer and I would come home at, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was so excited about what was going on. And I would want to wake up my wife and tell her, hey, guess what we saw, what we did. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, she'd already been asleep for about 4 hours and she didn't appreciate that. And I would often find that when she would wake up at 6 o'clock the next morning and get up with the kids, now she was starting to tell me about her day. So time and timing is important, especially if you're doing shift work. And I think a third challenge is activity. What I mean by that is, especially in younger families, younger relationships, there's a lot of activity going on. You've got a lot of times you've got kids that are going to different activities. You've got court going on. Your spouse or your partner, they've got all of this going on in their lives, and it's very difficult to really stop and spend quality time with each other. So those are some challenges to everybody, but especially within a law enforcement family.
Yeah, now again, I was just reading recently, there are some really significant studies that have been done that shows that a couple that can spend 10 minutes of time just talking, and I don't mean talking about problems, just actually talking every day, 10 minutes committed to actually sharing together every day, they say you're going to have a good marriage. But we want more than a good marriage. They say actually those that commit to 20 minutes of undivided, focused each other communication about what's going on in your lives, 20 minutes every day, you have an excellent marriage. And so that's where it's hard for law enforcement officers to find that kind of, committed, focused time because of the scheduling, yet it's so important
I
that
want to
that's
go.
done.
I want to go back to something that you just said because I think you hit on a key, and that is not talking about what's going on in the world, not talking about what's going on at work, talking about what's going on with me and with you.
Yes, that's so critical. And our spouses want to share that. They want to be part of our life and connect in that way. And those are keys to communication that are really important. Yeah.
Let's talk about a couple of other keys that I think are important. The first one is we need to pick a time when we can communicate. And you just touched on this. Those 10-minute segments, those 20-minute segments, they're not going to just happen.
No.
They have to be scheduled. They may even have to be scripted in the beginning. We have to pick a time when it is appropriate and when it's conducive. Nobody said this was going to be easy. And this is one of those things where we really have to focus on that. I think there's a secondary thing, and while face-to-face communication is vitally important, and you have to do that, but there may be times when that's not possible. So how do you continue that communication? For some people, they can do that via email. Some people can do it through text. Some people can do it through phone calls. I don't care how you do it, just do it. Just find those alternative times when face-to-face communication doesn't work.
And I think it's taking advantage of every moment you can find to communicate. A little note you could stick in a lunch if you're taking a lunch along. You just sneak it in there. Hey, just know I'm thinking about you today. So each of those, whatever that can be, where that engagement can be made, that comes up to part of that 10 or 20 minutes of communication connection.
I've ridden with some people that at 10, 11 o'clock at night, they'll stop what they're doing, they'll pick up the phone, they'll call their spouse or their partner, and they'll say, just want you to know I'm thinking about you as you get ready for bed. I love you. I'm doing good. We'll see you in the morning.
Yep, good stuff.
When we talk about communication, I think it's important to understand that communication is a give and take. We need to be able to listen to gather information rather than to critique what is being said. And we also need to speak to be understood rather than to prove our point. It becomes a competition sometimes in communication. And when that happens, everybody loses.
Yeah, and I think along with what you're sharing, that's really important, is one of the things men and women don't understand is that we communicate differently, and our needs are different when it comes to communication and what we understand as intimacy. I know, for instance, guys fix things. You know, men, the way we work, the way we're made is we see problems, we fix problems. We're all about solutions, and we live our lives pretty much that way. And for law enforcement, that's what you do. But women, typically, they're not concerned about the solution as much as they are about their feelings. And so for them, it's really important, if they're going to feel like they're communicating, they understand their spouse is connecting, their significant other connects in how they feel. That's why girls can spend hours on a phone and they'll talk about how they feel, or, boy, you know what my mom said to me today? It was horrible what she said. And they're going to respond, oh, that must have felt terrible. You must just, it must have been awful. Oh, it was. And they're going to talk. Now, for a guy, we're going, what a waste of time. I mean, what? That doesn't make any sense, because we're not interested really in feelings. We don't know what to do with feelings. But most women, when they're going to feel like they're really connecting and communicating, it's going to be because their feelings are being shared and experienced. Guys get in a lot of trouble when they try to jump from the feelings to the solutions too quickly, and that's just problems, guys. So, I mean, that's a big key. We all do it.
Been there.
We're fixers.
Been there.
That's what we're about. But realize that that's different for women.
One other thing that I think is important with some personalities, and that is, I just want to be heard. I just want to be heard. And I struggle with this one because I'm a fixer from way back. And especially with my wife, sometimes the most important thing is I just want you to shut up and listen. I just want to be heard and validated.
Yeah.
I don't do that as well as I should. Something I need to spend the next 4 decades working on. And as we finish up, I think 2 key words are trust and vulnerability. When it comes to communication, I have to be able to trust that I can say what I need to say, what I want to say to you. Or maybe even trust that you will accept the fact that I can't talk about this right now. But the other part of it is vulnerability. We spend so much of our time in law enforcement developing this shield, this crust, and we don't want anybody to penetrate it. But what happens is we become so lonely that we're in here by ourselves, and a lot of times we don't like the person that we're in here with. So we need to be able to be vulnerable to other people, to be able to express what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and what we need from the other person. Very important things, especially in the world of law enforcement, because we spend a lot of time trying to control things and not necessarily communicating at our best. When we come home, we have to be able to do that.
Good points, good points. I hope this is helping our friends that are listening and engaged in this, that they can have healthy, strong relationships. But for this week, we're going to wrap some things up. And as always, our wish is for you to be strong
And be safe.